Good evening. How are you?
Okay, gentlemen. Thank you very, very much for joining us tonight, gentlemen. Chazakim Abruchim. It's an honor and privilege. First of all, thank you to Mr. and Mrs. Joe Agelian for hosting this beautiful shir tonight. Tizkul mitzvot. And may your house always be open for smachot, for happy occasions, for wonderful things, for mitzvot. Tizkul mitzvot. Thank you very much, Joe. Zaku Baruch.
Amen.
Bezad Hashem. Can you move many more? Bezad Hashem. So this tonight, Bezad Hashem, we're going to be learning Parashat Shemot. A lot to talk about. And we would like to dedicate the learning tonight for the Refuah Shlema of Yaakov Yisrael Avraham ben Chana Esther Helen, Shachar ben Chana, may they have a Refuah Shlema b'toch Shar Cholei Yisrael. Also, the Ilui Nishmat Liel Dina Bat Ephraim. May her neshama go higher and higher in Gan Eden, B'ezad Hashem. Okay, so the parasha starts off, the beginning. Shemot b'nei Yisrael abayim Mitzrayma et Yaakov ishu beito ba'u. Says these are the names of the sons of Yisrael that came to Egypt. Yaakov ishu beito ba'u. Man and his household came. What does that mean? Ishu beito ba'u, that each man and his household. So over here points out one of the Mefarshim, the Chizkuni, a very interesting point. He says it's important for us to understand that Egypt was considered to be the most tameh place on earth. There was no place that was more tameh, which means impure, than Egypt. Over there, it was a place that is called shtufei zima. People were like entrenched in immorality. Whatever you can imagine, that's what they were doing in Egypt. Yaakov Avinu, who's coming down with his family now, with 70 people that are all in his family, he knows this. He knows that this is where they're going to. He knows that there's a challenge that could come to any one of his sons at any given moment, just like it happened to Yosef with Eshet Potiphar, right? With the wife of Potiphar. Yosef had a very big challenge. So in order to make sure that his children should be strong and not succumb to the challenges that are in Egypt, says the Torah, Ish uveito. Whenever the Torah says his household refers to his wife. It says by the Kohen Gadol, v'chiper ba'ado be'ad beito, which means that the person has to atone. The Kohen Gadol has to atone for himself, and he also has to atone for his household, which means for his wife as well. Okay? So over here, beito means his wife. What do you mean his wife? How many people had their wives? Over here says the Torah Kedusha, Yaakov Avinu made sure before his children came down to Egypt that every single one of them was married. That's what the Chizkuni says. Before they came down to Egypt, in preparation for where they were going, every single one of the kids had to get married. The Midrash says even more than that. The Midrash tells us that not only did they get married, but even the grandchildren who were just 1 and 2 years old. There was Chetzron, Peretz, and Chamul, grandchildren that were 1 or 2 years old. Yaakov couldn't get them married yet, they were too little, but he already made the shidduch for them, that they were already going to be married, meaning they already knew who they're going to marry. It was set up ahead of time. Why? What's the idea? Because when you know that you're up against something very, very strong, you know that you're going to a place of lots of temptation, you have to prepare ahead of time. You have to prepare. You have to be able to do something that can help you to fight off the incredible Yetzirah that is called Egypt. Oh, Baruch haba. Welcome. You have to be able to fight it off somehow. The only way Yaakov could see to fight it off is that each one of them should be married ahead of time. And that's the preparation. This is a very important lesson for all of us. Because by doing this, Yaakov Avinu kept the Kedusha, he kept the purity of the Jewish people that they had in Israel that came together with them to Egypt. That's why the Mefarshim say that, how do you say to Egypt in Hebrew? Mitzrayma. They went to Egypt. The gematria of the word Mitzrayma, to Egypt, is the same gematria as the word Shekhinah, which means the divine presence. That means that as they were going to Egypt, they had the Shekhinah with them. They had Hashem with them. Why? Because they took the proper steps to make sure that they keep the Kedusha of the Jewish people. So they're not just going and whatever happens, happens. No, we have to think ahead of time. How do we protect ourselves and make sure that we maintain our holiness and we don't fall into the traps of all the Egyptians? Very important point, because we today are in the same scenario. We also have to take precautions to make sure that we don't fall into the trap of the quote-unquote Egyptians. We're in the same situation. We have lots of temptations around us all the time. And it's our job to make sure that we hold on tight and we don't fall prey to those temptations. It's very important. That's what keeps the Kedusha in Klal Yisrael. So I wanted to start off with that because that's the first thing that the Torah tells us in this week's Parashat. Ishu Beito. It's the man and his household. Yaakov didn't have it any other way. They come together, already married. Even if they're not, there's already a shidduch for them, which is an amazing thing. We can't necessarily make shidduchim for kids that young, but we can do whatever we can to protect their sanctity, to protect their kedusha. One such example is, for example, a filter on a phone. Is a very, very powerful tool to make sure that a person doesn't stumble upon things that he shouldn't see, God forbid. So that's a very important lesson, I think, that we could start off with. Now, I think the big question here is the following. It says, Vayakom melech chadash, a new king arose in Egypt. Says Rashi, machloket, two opinions. Is it really a new king, or is it a king who made himself as if he's a new king, that he didn't remember Yosef? He doesn't know Yosef. He doesn't remember what happened with Yosef. Wait a second. It's a troubling thing if you think about it. The Jewish people in Egypt went from being the most prized, beloved people, the people that when Yosef had his brothers come from Israel, Paro was so happy. He said, this is the best thing that happened to our country. He was so happy. Yosef saved the country. His brothers are here. It's going to be even better for our country now. So he was so happy about this, tremendously happy. They were thrilled when Yaakov came. The famine stopped. We went from being the people that everybody loved to being the people that everybody hated. Vayakutsu mipnei bnei Yisrael means in this week's parasha, it tells us that they were disgusted by us. It means like you see a cockroach, you get disgusted. So, 1 second, what happened? 2 minutes ago, we saved your country. Yosef was the reason that you guys are even alive. And now all of a sudden you hate us, you're disgusted by us. What did we do? What changed? So, Rabotai, the Midrash tells us a very important point. What changed is that when Yosef died, it says in the Midrash, the Jewish people stopped doing Brit Milah. Okay? Why did they stop doing Brit Milah? What would prompt anybody to stop circumcising themselves? Who cares? The answer is, when you're in a foreign land, you're in a foreign nation, and you want to be like the people that are around you. Everybody's going to the bathhouse, everybody's going to bathe in the Nile River, and your body looks different than their body. Doesn't feel comfortable. And you think that because you're different, they're going to hate you. So they said, you know what? Forget it. It's going to cause trouble between us and our neighbors. Let's just let go of it. There's one opinion, the opinion of the Bet HaLevi, that says, God forbid, they didn't actually not do Brit Milah. You know what they did? They pulled up their skin that it should look like they don't have a Brit Milah. Which I don't know technically how exactly does that work. But that's what he says. They pulled up their skin somehow to the point where it looked, they did Brit Milah, but then they pulled it up. So instead of it looking like this, it looked, like that. Which is what they did. That's the way the Bet HaLevi learns. What's the significance of this? Comes along Maran agrees. The Brisker Rav comes and explains the following idea. He says the idea is HaKadosh Baruch Hu specifically wanted us to be separated from the Goyim. Hashem says, I want you to be different than everybody else. I want you to be separated from everybody else. You're not the same as them. You have a different job than they do. When you go ahead and you do something to be equal to them, to be the same as them, so then that causes them to hate you. Hashem places in their heart hatred against you. Why? Because if you're not going to make yourself separate, then they will make you separate. In a nice way of putting it, if the Jewish people don't make kiddush, then the goyim make havdalah. Okay? You understand the point? If we don't sanctify ourselves, separate ourselves, do what we're supposed to do, that we are clearly different, visibly different than them, we don't do the same things as them, we do circumcisions differently than them. So if we don't do that, then Hashem says, well, it's going to happen one way or the other. So I have to make sure that you're different. How do I do so? I place hatred in their hearts against you. So you pick which way you want it to happen. So because of this led to the moment where the Egyptians are looking at us and they're saying, we are disgusted by these people. 1 second, 2 minutes ago, they were your favorite people. They saved you. They did everything for you. You're alive because of them. I hate them. They disgust me. I have to do something about this Jewish problem. I have to enslave them. I have to kill their babies. Shem Yishmor. Paro took 300 babies, Jewish babies, every morning, slaughtered them, bathed in their blood. 300 Jewish babies every night, and slaughtered them and bathed in their blood every day. Every day. You understand what we're talking about? The level of hatred that we're talking about is so deep. How does that happen?
But I lost the connection between Brit Milah.
The connection is that the Brit Milah is what separated us from the Goyim.
They didn't like
the Jewish people decided.
No, the Egyptians didn't like that they Jews are.
We're trying to become closer to being Egyptian. That's what happens. Hashem places the pasuk that it says specifically. I'll read it to you inside.
I know what the Jews tried it, but the Egyptians didn't like the fact that the Jews gonna look like them. Correct.
So the pasuk specifically says this idea that when you don't, when this kind of thing happens, hafach libam lisno amo litnakel ba'avadav. That means Hashem flips their heart around to hate his nation, to attack his servants. The Jewish people are the servants of Hashem, and Hashem hafach libam turns their heart around, which is such a very scary thought, but that's what it is about that. So over here we have a very important message that we can never lose our Jewish identity. We have to be very clear that we are Jews and be proud of it. By doing so, they will give you respect. They will love you. They'll be happy that you're doing what you're doing. But the minute you try and remove yourself from your Jewish identity and say, no, I'm like you, I'm the same as you, that's when the hatred comes. Very powerful point from the Brisker Rav. Now, that being said, so we know why they enslaved us. We know that we started to get closer to them, to be like them, and that's why they hated us so much and did all these terrible things. Now, I want to share with you one point that could have stopped it all. Could have stopped the entire slavery. The Midrash tells us something very fascinating. There was a moment where the Egyptian people came to Paro and they said, let's wage war on these Jews. Okay? Let us get them once and for all. The Midrash tells us Paro said, no, I can't do that to them. Don't you understand that the whole reason that we, the Egyptian people, are alive is because of them? How could we go ahead and kill the people that were so good to us that because of them we're alive? It doesn't make sense. It says at that moment, the Midrash tells us At that very moment, the Egyptian people dethroned Paro for 3 months. They took him off from being the king for 3 months. They took him away from being the king. Says the Midrash, Paro realized that no longer will he be the king of Egypt unless he does something. And at that point, he decided to agree to their demands and to kill the Jewish people and to start to enslave them. So there was a moment here, a moment of opportunity, that Paro could have saved all of these people, all of these Jewish people. No slavery, no babies that are being killed, no hundreds of years of forced labor, torture. All of it could have been gone. How? If he would have had one thing that he would have kept. He actually started to have it, but then he left it. One thing, and that is called hakarat hatov. He had to have the acknowledgement of the good. If a person acknowledges the good that somebody does for him, he could save so many lives, so many terrible things. Paro could have saved the entire Jewish slavery. Why? Because he could have acknowledged the fact that the Jewish people just saved them, took care of them, were the reason that they're alive. But he failed to do so. Failure in hakarat hatov could have devastating results, Rabotai. Again, the words are hakarat hatov, to acknowledge the good that somebody does for you. If he would have acknowledged that good and say, excuse me, I have certain principles here. Yes, you want me to go kill these people and get rid of them, but I'm sorry, I can't because of the fact that they did good to us. It goes against my principles. That would have shut everything down. And this is a theme throughout this entire parasha, and I'm going to show you a lot of places where this theme comes up. But first, I want to show you another case in the Tanakh where it comes up. There was a prophet by the name of Zechariah. Zechariah was a prophet that got up and told people in his time period of the Second Temple. He told them, gentlemen, you guys are going to be destroyed by Hashem because you're worshiping idols. And he told them that, and they didn't like it. And there was a king by the name of Yoash. Yoash had Zechariah killed. Why? Because Zechariah was telling everybody to stop worshiping idols, and Yoash wasn't having it. Now listen to this. Yoash was saved by Zechariah's father when he was a child. There was a queen by the name of Ataliah. She was the mother of Achaziyahu. Achaziyahu died, and Ataliah wanted to have the power of being the queen. She killed her entire family. Her entire family to be the queen. There was one kid that survived because this kid was hidden by a man by the name of Yehoyada HaKohen. And that was Yoash. Yehoyada the Kohen saved Yoash, hid him, had somebody nurse him, took care of him for 7 years until they were able to rebel against the queen, and then he became the king. Yoash became the king. The son of this man, Yehoyada Kohen, who saved Yoash, was Zechariah the prophet. Yoash ended up killing Zechariah, the son of the man that saved his life and helped him to become the king. He completely got rid of his loyalty to this man, Yehoyada. Again, now I'm not done. Here's the problem. Zechariah was killed. Now, many years later, for many years, the blood of Zechariah was by the altar of Bet HaMikdash, and it was bubbling. It would never go away. This was talking about a very long period of time, hundreds of years, until there was a day where the Babylonians came and destroyed the temple. Okay, this was the time period of Nebuchadnezzar, and he sent his general by the name of Nebuzaradan, to go and conquer Jerusalem. Nebuzaradan is at the site of the Bet HaMikdash. He sees the altar. He sees the blood on the floor, bubbling. He asks them, what is this? And they said, this is the blood of Zechariah that was killed. He says, why was he killed? So they were a little bit hesitant to say, but they told him he was killed because he was telling everybody to stop worshiping idols and to serve Hashem. So you killed the prophet Zechariah, who also was a Kohen, who also was a Dayan, in the Bet HaMikdash. And you know when they did it, by the way? It was on Yom Kippur, which fell on Shabbat. That's when they killed him. He was a Kohen, he was a Dayan, he was a Navi, a prophet, and it was on Shabbat, on Yom Kippur. So he says, you did this? So he realized Zechariah wants to be avenged. He wants his blood to be avenged. So Nebuzaradan started to slaughter people. And he started killing people left and right, in front of the blood of Zechariah. And the blood kept on going and going. It kept on bubbling. It wanted more. Until it says that Nebuzaradan on that day slaughtered hundreds of thousands of people and children, yeshiva students. It was crazy. Rivers of blood, it says over there. And it didn't stop boiling. It still wanted more. Nebuzaradan at that moment, the story has a very incredible twist. At the end, he said, if this is what happens to somebody who killed one person, that the blood needs to be avenged, so then what about somebody who killed all these different people, meaning himself, that he that day killed hundreds of thousands of people? He said, I'm done for. I'm over. I'm finished. So at that point, he converted and became a Jew. Amazing twist to the story of Nebuzaradan. He converted and became Jewish. But at any rate, all of that could have been prevented if King Yoash would have remembered that the father of this Zechariah saved my life. If he would have had hakarat, just a little hakarat hatov, just a small bit of the ability to acknowledge the good that somebody does for you, all these hundreds of thousands of people would have been saved. Amazing. But the theme doesn't stop there. It continues. Look at the Parashat, this week's Parashat. Moshe Rabbeinu sees somebody, he sees an Egyptian man hitting a Jewish person. It says, Vayifen chovacho. He looked this way, looked that way, which Rashi tells us means he looked into the future to see if this Egyptian would ever have anything good coming out of him. It says, Vayar ki en ish. He sees that nobody's around to protect the Egyptian, but Rashi tells us it means he sees that nothing good will come out of this guy. And at that moment, it says that Moshe Rabbeinu kills the Egyptian. Rashi tells us again, he said one of the names of Hashem, and the Egyptian guy was dead. Fine. Now you have a dead body over here. What do? Where do you take this dead body? People are going to look for him. There was a miracle that happened, and the earth swallowed up this dead body, and that was that. The earth took care of it for Moshe. That's one thing. Another story of the Parashat, and we're going to get to what I'm talking about right now, very shortly. Moshe Rabbeinu is a baby. All the baby boys have to be thrown into the Nile River. And instead of doing that, Yocheved, the mother of Moshe, takes Moshe and puts him into a basket, and the basket floats all the way down the river until it reaches Batya, the daughter of Paro, who then saves Moshe and raises him like her own son. Fast forward to next week's parasha, and it's now time to bring about the plague of blood on the Egyptians and the plague of lice on the Egyptians. How do you bring about the plague of blood? You have to hit the water. So Moshe seemingly should take the staff and hit the water. But you can't do that. Hashem says, no, you don't have the right to hit the water. The water saved you. You have to have hakarat hatov. So Aaron could hit the water, not you. You have to have hakarat hatov. And the same thing. It's time to hit the earth to bring the lice on the Egyptians. You want to do it? No, you can't. You have to remember that the dust of this land swallowed up the Egyptian to save your life. You can't hit it. You have to have hakarat hatov. You have to have the acknowledgement of the good that this thing did for you, even if it's an inanimate object. Unbelievable. It's dust. It's water. It's not a human being. Look at how sensitive we have to be. This thing did good for me. You can't hit it. That's what Hashem is telling Moshe. You can't hit it. Yes, you have a question.
Earlier you said that if previously the other gentleman, if he had acknowledged the goodness of hundreds of thousands of Jews wouldn't have been killed.
Right.
Why so many people should get killed because of one person's mistake?
That's a good question. I don't have the answer. I don't know why so many people should die because of that one person's mistake, but still, nevertheless, we do see that this is the case. Had he remembered what this person's father did for him, he would have never done that. Had he given it a little bit more thought.
Because of him for sure, or just other reasons possibly.
Every person that is killed because there's a reason that he deserves to die. It's not just that one guy happened to do something. It's every person that is healthy or not, God forbid, because there's a reason that Hashem wants him to either yes be healthy or not be healthy, or die or not. There's a reason for everything. But what we can say is that we do see that at the root of it all was a lack of hakarat tov, a lack of acknowledging the good. Yes, we have a question.
You mentioned appreciation. Yehudi comes from Hadara,
Oh,
which means appreciation. So our
Right.
name is Yehudi.
exactly. That's our name, Yehudim. We say thank you. We're modim. We admit when somebody does good for us that we admit in that. Sure, beautiful. So now, Rabotai, I want to just point out a couple of more interesting points about hakarat tov, because I think it's so super duper important in our lives. We'll get to that soon. But it says later on in the Torah, Lo yavo amoni umoavi bikal Hashem. What is the halakha over here? Let's say you have, I'll give you an example. Let's say you have somebody from Amalek that converts. Let's say Haman's children. It says that Haman's great-grandchildren studied Torah in Bnei Barak. How so? Because even if you're from Amalek, if you convert and become Jewish, you could be a Jew. There's no problem. You could become a Jew. But there's two nations that a person that comes from this nation, he could convert, but he's not allowed to marry a naturally born Jew. And that is Ammoni and Moavi. Why not? What's the problem with being Ammoni and Moavi? The idea is the following. Ammon and Moav came from Lot and his two daughters. Remember the story we saw earlier in Sefer Bereshit? Lot and his two daughters, there was a time where Sodom was turned upside down, and there were 3 survivors, Lot and his 2 daughters. So over there it says they thought that there was nobody else on planet Earth, and they got their father drunk, and they both had relations with their father. One had a child named Moav, which means from my dad. The other one had a child named Ammon, which means nation. Now, why was Lot alive? Because he was the nephew of Avraham Avinu, and Hashem loved Avraham, and Hashem knew that Avraham would be upset if Lot were to die. So therefore, Hashem saved Avraham. Hashem saved Lot, right? Hashem saved Lot. Avraham himself saved Lot previously from the 4 kings who took him captive. That's a different story. So Avraham is responsible for the life of Lot. Fine. Fast forward many years. The Jewish people left Egypt. And now, the Jewish people left Egypt. And now you find yourself at a time where you don't have any food. You're stuck in the middle of the desert. Who's supposed to come to you to help you? People that owe you something. Ammon and Moab were 2 nations that owed the Jewish people, because our father, our great-grandfather, is the whole reason they exist. And the least they could have done is come and give us some bread, some water, something. But nothing. 0. Therefore, says the Torah Kedusha, these people are lacking hakarat hatov. They are lacking the understanding that they have to do good for you. So therefore, they're not allowed to ever, even if they convert, even if they're after 10 generations, they're never allowed to marry a naturally born Jewish girl. We can't let them in all the way because they're lacking hakarat hatov. Now, flip side, what would you say if I asked you about an Egyptian convert? An Egyptian convert. Now, this guy is the son of the people that enslaved us, tortured us, killed us, did terrible things to us. Terrible. Can they ever marry a naturally born Jew? 3rd generation, yes. Why? Because the bottom line is that if we wouldn't have gone down to Egypt, we also wouldn't have had food, and we would have died. So we have to have Hakarat Tov to them. Wait a minute. They tortured us. They did terrible things to us. Yeah, but the bottom line is that because of them, we're alive. You can't forget that. You have to have Hakarat Tov. You have to acknowledge the good that they did to you. So you can't just say it. You have to practice what you preach too. Yes, they were bad to us, but bottom line, because of them, we're alive. We have to remember that. Amazing. Look at to what extent the Torah requires that we have Hakarat Tov. It's so important that we internalize this message, because usually the way that it works is the closer you are to somebody, the more that person usually does for you and you do for them. For example, your children, your wife. These are people that usually the amount of things that they do for you and you do for them, it's a tremendously high level. But for some reason, the closer that we are to them, the more we expect and the more we fail to acknowledge what they do for us. And that's a problem. We many times expect it. We take it for granted that there's dinner and that there's the laundry is done and that everything is running the way it should run, that the homework was done with the kids, or whatever it may be. It's taken for granted. And our lesson over here that we're learning right now is that there's no such thing that we take that for granted. We have to always acknowledge the good. That's part of being Jewish, like we just heard before. Yehudi, we say thank you. We admit that somebody did something for us. And that's good. It's positive. Very important. Okay. I want to continue with another you call it a burning question. This week's Parashat has the story of the burning bush. Okay? The bush that was burning, where Hashem reveals himself to Moshe, and it doesn't get consumed. Moshe is chasing after this sheep. He finds himself on Mount Sinai, and then he sees this very incredible sight of the bush that's burning, and it's not getting consumed. So Moshe Rabbeinu wants to go see what's going on, but he's afraid. It says that he's afraid to look. So we're going to talk about that in a couple of minutes. But first, my question is, why does Hashem appear to Moshe in a burning bush? Of all things, a bush. This question always bothered me. What's the significance of? I'm sure some way we'll be able to get there. Yes.
If he came looking like an animal, then the Jews would have worshipped that animal, like other nations do, a cow, sheep. But impossible to worship burning bush, just impossible. You can never keep it on, you can never get close to it, you can never touch it.
Ah, wow.
It's an object.
Very nice.
You gotta go worship the object.
So Ronnie is in good company. Very high five, Ronnie. Very good. You are in good company with the Chizkuni and Tosfot. Tosfot and the Chizkuni say what Ronnie said. They say, one answer that they say is that the reason that a Kadosh Baruch Hu chose a bush is because a bush is never worshipped as idol worship.
Fire, they did. Worship fire.
Fire, yes, but a bush, a thorn bush, they worship big trees, they worship other things, but a regular bush on the ground, they don't worship it as idol worship. That's from the Chizkuni.
It's also a burning bush that wasn't burning.
Right, it was a burning. Right, it is a burning bush. It wasn't being consumed. Right. No, but the point is that Hashem chose a bush because a bush is something that's never worshipped as Avodah Zarah. So therefore, it had the ability to be a receptacle for a vessel for kedusha for Hashem. That's one answer. Very nice, Ronnie. Very good. Now, the other answers I saw from Abenu Bachir are that Hashem is trying to say, listen, right now, you, the Jewish people, are in a tight place. The bush is small, it's thorns, it's tight, it's not pleasant, it's stressful, it's suffering. That's what the bush represents. But Hashem is trying to say, I am with you. I'm with you. You're in a tight situation, but I am with you. That's one way of looking at it. Says Rabbeinu Bachya, also you could say that what it means is that the Jewish people are in a miraculous type of a situation. Why? Because here they are being attacked from all angles. They're being subjugated. They're being tortured. And still, they're not being consumed. They're surviving. They're managing to live somehow. That's the story of the Jewish people throughout all time, by the way. That's the biggest, I think, one of the biggest proofs that there's Hashem watching over us.
They're survivors.
How do we survive all these things? We went from one thing to the next, pogrom to inquisition to, terrible things. You ask yourself, who survived such things? Only Am Yisrael. Why? Because Hashem is watching us. That's the only way you can explain it. So Hashem is saying, listen, right now, you're being attacked from all sides, but you're still going to survive this. That's why it's a burning bush that's not getting consumed. Now listen to this, Abutai. Comes along the Ben Ish Chai and says another beautiful answer. Okay? Follow along over here. Amazing. And this is what I want to talk a little bit about. It says the Ben Ish Chai. How do you say bush in Hebrew? Siach. Right. Siach, but over here the Torah calls it a sneh. Right? You're right, Siach, but it's a sneh. The sneh nenuka. So over here the bush is called a sneh. Sneh is samech nun he. Now, how do you spell out the letter samech? Samech mem chaf. Okay? How do you spell out the letter nun? Nun, vav, nun. Okay? How do you spell out the letter he? Hey. Okay? Take the milui, take those extra letters over here, and what word do you get? You get samech memchet, so you have memchet, you have vav nun from the nun, and you have hey. This gives you the word ha-namuch, the low one. The low one. What does it mean to be the low one? It means that the sneh was chosen, the bush was chosen because it's low. It's the most humble. That's the idea. Just like we say that Har Sinai was chosen to be the place where Hashem gave the Torah because it's the most low, it's the most humble. The sneh was chosen to be the place where Hashem revealed himself to Moshe because it's the lowest place, the most humble. Now, what's the significance of that? The significance is that if you are somebody that's humble, you're low. You don't view yourself as, I'm worthy, I deserve it, I'm the one that's supposed to be the leader. But you're like Moshe, who for an entire week when Hashem was trying to convince him to go, in this week's parasha, he said, no, I'm not the right man for the job. He was super humble. If that's your attitude, then change around those letters. And now you get the word hamachon, which means you are the place, machon leshivtecha. You are the place where Hashem wants to rest on you. Why? Because you're humble. That's the idea. Says the Ben Ish Chai, sneh, embedded in the word, in the letters of the word sneh, is that the sneh is humble, it's low. And that was the quality of Moshe Rabbeinu. He was the most humble person. Now look at what Moshe Rabbeinu got as a result of his humility. The Pasuk tells us over here the following. Vayaster Moshe panav. Moshe hid his face. He was hiding his face from the burning bush. Ki yareh me'abit, because he was scared to look El Elokim, to look at Hashem. He was scared to see the sight over here. Says the Gemara in Masechet Brachot Daf Zayin Amud Aleph, because of his humility, because he was scared to look, because he says, I'm not worthy of looking in the direction of Hashem. So look at what he got. It says, Bischar vayaster Moshe panav, because of the fact that he hid his face and he didn't look, he was rewarded. Leklaster panim. When the Torah says people looked at Moshe, they couldn't look at him. Why? Because when he turned his head away from the bush because he was humble and didn't feel worthy to look, because of that, Hashem gave him a gift that his face shined with a countenance, a radiance. People couldn't look at him because of the shine that was coming out of his face. Why did he have that shine? Because when it was his turn to look at Hashem, he said, I'm not worthy. And he turned his face away. Because he was scared, ki yareh, in the reward that he got for being scared of looking, people were afraid to even come close to him. He was afraid to come close to the bush. Hashem says, measure for measure, people will be afraid to even come close to you because of what you did. because he was afraid to look. So it says, Zacha le'utmunat Hashem yabit. Because he was afraid to look at the bush, Hashem said, there's going to be no human being that will ever see more than you of Hashem. Nobody will ever see more of God than you. Tmunat Hashem yabit. Guys, you understand the words I'm saying? The image of Hashem, he will see. Again, there's a limit to that. A human cannot see that, all of Hashem in a physical body. But the most that could have been seen was Moshe Rabbeinu. Why? Because he displayed humility and didn't say, I'm all that. In contrast to a group of people at Har Sinai, it says the Zekenim, Vayiru et Elokim. It says the elders of the Jewish people, when Hashem revealed himself at Har Sinai, the elders of the Jewish people, they saw Hashem, Vayochlu Vayishtu, and they ate and they drank. No issue. Let's have breakfast. Right? And they just got a revelation of God. It says that they were punished for that. They're punished for that because you have to have a certain reverence, a certain fear. And Moshe had that. So over here, Rabotai, we have this idea that Hashem is trying to show you that I am conducting myself with humility. I bring the Torah on the lowest mountain. I reveal myself to Moshe in a little bush. Little bush. That's all. Not grand. Just a little bush. Why? Because that's what I want. I want you to be humble. I want humility. There's a very interesting story in the Gemara where the Gemara says that you should always try and see a king. Always try and see a king, whether it's a Jewish king or a not Jewish king. Try and see a king. There's a special blessing you make on a king. The Gemara in Masechet Brachot tells us that there was a man by the name of Rav Sheshet who was blind. He was a big tzaddik, but he was blind. And everybody heard the king is coming to town, and they went to go see the king. Rav Sheshet went as well. So he went to see the king, and there was a heretic there, somebody who was a min, an epicurus. He doesn't believe in Torah. So he says to Rav Sheshet, Rabbi, I don't understand. You're coming to see the king. You can't see anything. What are you doing here? Right? Imagine asking somebody that question. He said, what are you doing here? Right? So the rabbi said, you'll see that I know better than you when the king is coming. So he says, really? Yeah, you'll see. It says the first group of troops passed by, and then there was a tremendous noise, and the heretic said to Rav Sheshet, the king is coming. Rav Sheshet said, the king is not coming. Nothing happened. The second huge group of army troops passed by, and there was a huge noise, and the heretic said to Rav Sheshet, the king is coming. Rav Sheshet said, the king is not coming. Nobody came. And then the third troop of armies, the third army troop passes by, and then there's a silence. And then Rav Sheshet said to the heretic, the king is here. And the king just showed up. Why? So he asked him, how did you know that? How did you know? The answer is, he says, that the king of earth is similar to the king of heaven. How so? He says, in Shamayim, we know there's a story with Eliyahu Navi. When Hashem revealed himself to Eliyahu, first, there was a loud noise. There was there was wind that could break down mountains. And it says, Hashem is not in the wind. Then there was a tremendous noise. Hashem is not in the noise. And then it says at the end, there was a kol d'mama daka, there was a silent little sound. And at that point, Eliyahu got the revelation of Hashem. Hashem revealed himself to Eliyahu only after a kol d'mama daka, a very small sound. Why? Because Hashem reveals himself through humility. That's the point. Through being humble. And if Hashem is saying, listen to me, look at me, I'm trying to show humility. I'm trying to show you that I am humble and I'm Hashem. So then, how much more so you, that you need to be, and all of us have to be humble. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us, that we should all have this humility. And then we're zochet to have the high-level connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it's so important for us to understand that many times we think to ourselves that we accomplish, we do. I made a deal, I bought, I sold, I this, I that, etc. We have this feeling of ga'ava. Look at what I've done. And really, Our job is to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to say, no, everything that we have is all from Hashem. That's the most important thing, because Hashem wants us to have our humility. Abotai, we'll stop over here. Chazakim Buchim. We'll call it a night.
45 minutes.